New York halts offshore wind energy transmission plan. What's next? In an unexpected twist that could reshape the renewable energy narrative, New York has halted its bold offshore wind transmission plan amid growing federal uncertainty, a decision that could have wide-ranging effects on power costs and energy policy. On July 17, the New York State Public Service Commission announced that it is suspending the process to plan and secure transmission pathways for up to 8 gigawatts of offshore wind power destined for New York City by 2033, citing stalled federal permits as a key barrier to moving forward. This pause is aimed at shielding state consumers from premature infrastructure expenses during a time when unexpected regulatory actions could throw projects off track. The Commission made it clear that recent moves by the federal government to suspend new offshore wind leasing and issuing permits have made it impractical to push ahead with short-term project developments. As Commission Chair Rory M. Christian pointed out, given the uncertainty coming out of Washington, we must act to protect consumers. His statement also reassured that this decision is only temporary, with plans to resume the process once federal permitting is restored. It's important to note that New York's overall dedication to offshore wind remains intact. Ongoing initiatives like South Fork Wind, Empire Wind, and Sunrise Wind are not affected by this suspension and will continue on their development lanes. This decision, however, introduces a spark of controversy. Could pausing now cause the state to lose momentum in its clean energy transition, or is it a wise move to avoid risky investments? Hillary Bright, executive director at the nonprofit organization Turn Forward, emphasized the strategic importance of these shovel-ready projects, noting, "Shovel-ready offshore wind projects are poised to add major capacity to the U.S. grid just when it's needed most." She further warned that an impending power shortage might emerge as the country faces surging energy demands from sectors like artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, and the broader digital economy. This insight invites us to deeply consider if the current federal strategies, or lack thereof, could leave the nation underpowered during a critical phase of technological evolution. Looking ahead, the Commission has instructed its team to leverage the insights gained from this halted process for future planning efforts. The focus will remain on ensuring energy affordability, grid reliability, and risk reduction, with additional guidance expected to be integrated into the 2026 Clean Energy Standard Biennial Review. Bright summarized the overall sentiment by stressing, "Now is not the time for us to hold back the potential contribution of any energy source. For the U.S. to foster the energy resources it needs to stay competitive in the future, we must support continued development of all power resources." But here's where it gets controversial. While many applaud the vigilant approach to safeguard consumer interests, others fear that delaying critical wind infrastructure could hinder progress in America's clean energy race. What do you think? Is this cautious step a necessary safeguard for taxpayers? Or does it risk stifling a booming sector when we most need its benefits? Share your thoughts and join the conversation. Battery projects in review for Long Island despite federal headwinds. In the face of federal challenges to offshore wind energy, New York State is pivoting towards a robust backup plan: the development of large-scale battery storage projects across Long Island. Currently, about 36 of these projects are under scrutiny, awaiting approval from state grid managers. These projects, however, are not set in stone. They face hurdles such as financing difficulties, local moratoriums, community resistance, and a generally skeptical view of renewable energy from federal authorities. But here's where it gets controversial. Despite these challenges, the Trump administration's big, beautiful bill has surprisingly extended the timeline for these battery storage facilities to receive crucial federal subsidies, pushing the deadline to 2033 before tax incentives begin to wane. This legislative adjustment provides a longer runway than initially anticipated, offering a glimmer of hope for developers. Battery storage is deemed a critical component of New York's green energy strategy, especially as the state aims to phase out fossil fuel plants and integrate an expected surge from offshore wind farms, targeting a formidable 6,000 megawatts of battery storage by 2030. However, recent federal actions have cast a shadow over these green ambitions. The suspension of new leases and permits for offshore wind projects by the Trump administration has prompted the State Public Service Commission, PSC, to halt evaluations for new power transmission lines into New York City, which were intended to support up to 8,000 megawatts of offshore wind power. This decision starkly contrasts with the state's goal of achieving 9,000 megawatts of wind power by 2035, underscoring a significant setback. Despite this, the PSC clarified that this decision would not affect a separate transmission project from Long Island to Westchester, which is designed to bolster Long Island's energy system's reliability and resilience, independent of future offshore wind developments. This move by the PSC allows for a more cautious advancement, considering the potential shifts in federal offshore wind policies. Meanwhile, the New York Independent System Operator, NYSO, continues to review over 36 proposals for battery storage facilities that seek connections to the Long Island Power Authority grid. These projects are scattered across Nassau and Suffolk counties, and are slated for the next 3 to 5 years. NYSO's role is crucial as it ensures these projects can integrate into the grid without compromising system stability or imposing excessive costs on consumers. Among the notable proposals are 3 by National Grid, including a significant 50-megawatt project near its Glenwood Landing facility. This site is close to where another project by Jupiter Power was recently withdrawn due to permitting issues. Local opposition remains a potent force, with residents like Doug Ogenthaler vocally opposing such developments, citing safety concerns with lithium-ion battery technology. National Grid, however, is exploring additional sites in Wading River and Southampton, reflecting ongoing interest in expanding battery storage capabilities. The New York Power Authority, NYPA, is also proposing projects, including a 49.1 megawatt battery at its Brentwood facility and a larger 170 megawatt storage system in Holtsville. These initiatives are part of NYPA's broader strategy to transition from natural gas to cleaner energy sources, contingent on ensuring grid reliability. Key Capture Energy, another major player, has proposed several sites across Suffolk, demonstrating a strong commitment to bolstering Long Island's battery storage capacity, irrespective of federal policy directions. Other companies, like Caithness Energy, Holtsville Energy Storage, and numerous others have also thrown their hats into the ring, proposing various projects that collectively add substantial energy storage potential to the region. This flurry of activity highlights a critical juncture for New York's energy landscape. As federal policies fluctuate, the state's commitment to a greener future hangs in the balance. But the question remains, will these battery storage projects prove to be the resilient backbone needed to support New York's ambitious renewable energy goals? What do you think about the potential of these battery storage projects to reshape New York's energy future? Share your thoughts and join the discussion below. New York pauses offshore wind transmission. What it means for the future. New York State hits pause on offshore wind transmission development until federal policies shift. July 22, 2025, by Adriana Bulgin. New York State has made a bold move that could reshape the future of its offshore wind energy plans. The New York State Public Service Commission, PSC, has officially decided to strategically terminate the Public Policy Transmission Need (PPTN) process specifically designed for offshore wind transmission infrastructure. This development is a direct response to recent federal actions that have put a hold on new offshore wind permitting nationwide. But here's where it gets controversial. The PSC argues this termination is necessary to shield New York State ratepayers from bearing unnecessary and premature costs associated with infrastructure that may not be built anytime soon. On July 17, the PSC explained that it is recalibrating the timeline for offshore wind transmission projects to avoid imposing premature expenses on New Yorkers, while still keeping the door open for rapid action once federal conditions become favorable again. This means that although the current transmission planning is halted, the state remains committed to offshore wind, just not on a schedule hampered by external uncertainties. To give some background, the PSC initially declared a public policy transmission need in June 2023, targeting the integration of between 4.77 gigawatts (GW) and 8 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity into New York City's energy grid. Following that, in April 2024, the New York Independent System Operator, NYSO, kicked off a solicitation process seeking proposals for the city's PPTN transmission projects. The objective was to connect nearly 4.8 gigawatts of offshore wind generation to the statewide grid efficiently and reliably. NYSO had been reviewing these proposals since April 2024, with plans to select transmission developers by the final quarter of 2025. Meanwhile, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA, had been gearing up to launch its sixth offshore wind solicitation by early 2026. And in early 2025, NYSERDA sought public feedback on the possibility of procuring generation-only offshore wind projects, meaning the transmission connections would be handled separately under the PPTN transmission project rather than bundled with generation projects. This was a novel approach intended to streamline project development and promote flexibility. However, the federal government's recent decision to freeze permitting and construction for offshore wind farms, highlighted by an executive order issued in January 2025, has thrown these plans into uncertainty. The PSC emphasized that this federal pause fundamentally undermines New York's ability to meet its offshore wind targets in the near term, and all but negates the original purpose of the ongoing transmission solicitation. As a result, the Commission made the tough call to rescind the transmission need determination and halt NYSO's evaluation process for these projects. Some may view this as a setback, but New York's government insists it is more about prudence than retreat. While the PPTN process is on hold, efforts to lay the groundwork for the state's future offshore wind transmission infrastructure continue. The PSC has instructed the Department of Public Service, DPS, staff to integrate insights gained from the PPTN process into updating the state's Clean Energy Standard, CS, solicitation practices, as outlined in the PSC's May 2025 CS Biennial Review Order. Essentially, this means taking the lessons learned so far to improve how offshore wind projects will be planned and procured in the future, aiming to reduce risks, find cost-effective solutions, and maximize reliability and affordable benefits for New Yorkers. In line with this, DPS staff will explore ways to coordinate offshore wind generation with transmission infrastructure more strategically. This approach could include comprehensive planning that mitigates development risks and fosters a resilient, cost-effective system. The PSC also plans to continue reliability planning through existing frameworks, like the coordinated grid planning process, ensuring necessary transmission upgrades and solutions remain on the radar. In tandem with NYSERDA and NYSO, DPS will work on identifying potential clean energy solutions that could be incorporated into the next CS Biennial Review due in 2026. Our foremost responsibility is protecting consumers, said PSC Chair Rory M. Christian. Amid the uncertainties from Washington on offshore wind, withdrawing the PPTN determination is the responsible step. However, this is far from over. We will keep pushing forward on offshore wind infrastructure when federal leasing and permitting resume. To put this into perspective, New York currently has 132 megawatts (MW) of offshore wind capacity connected to its grid, coming from the state's first offshore wind project, South Fork, operated by Ørsted. Another significant project, Empire Wind 1, saw construction restart in May 2025 after a federal stop work order was lifted. When complete, Empire Wind 1 will add 816 megawatts and mark the first offshore wind farm directly linked to New York City's grid. Further adding to the state's ambitions, the 924-megawatt Sunrise Wind project, also by Ørsted and under construction, plans to supply electricity to Long Island. This project is notable for being the first offshore wind farm in the U.S. to employ high-voltage direct current (HVDC) transmission technology, a cutting-edge method that improves power delivery over long distances with greater efficiency. This situation raises provocative questions. Should states forge ahead with large-scale renewable energy projects independently, or must they wait for federal alignment? Is protecting ratepayers from premature costs a wise financial strategy, or does it risk slowing essential progress toward clean energy goals? And here's the part most people miss. The balance between federal and state energy policies can directly impact how quickly we transition to sustainable power. What do you think? Is New York's decision a prudent pause or a frustrating delay? Share your thoughts and join the conversation below.